Once upon a time, in a kingdom nestled between towering mountains and sprawling forests, there lived a young princess named Snow White. Her skin was as fair as freshly fallen snow, her lips as red as roses, and her hair as dark as the night sky. She was beloved by all who knew her, for her kindness and gentle spirit shone brighter than her beauty. But Snow White's life was not without sorrow. Her mother, the queen, had passed away when she was just a child, and her father, the king, had remarried a woman of great beauty, but cold heart. The new queen was vain and proud, and she could not bear the thought of anyone surpassing her in beauty. She spent hours gazing into her enchanted mirror, asking, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" For years, the mirror had always replied, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." But one fateful day, the mirror's answer changed. "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White is fairer still than you." The queen's heart turned to ice. Consumed by jealousy, she ordered her huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and rid her of the princess forever. "Bring me her heart as proof," she commanded. The huntsman led Snow White deep into the woods, but as he raised his knife, he could not bring himself to harm her. "Run, princess," he urged. "Run far away and never return to the castle." With tears in her eyes, Snow White fled into the forest, her heart pounding with fear. The forest was dark and unfamiliar, but as Snow White wandered, she began to notice its hidden beauty. Birds sang sweet melodies, and sunlight filtered through the trees, casting golden beams on the forest floor. Exhausted and alone, she stumbled upon a small cottage nestled in a clearing. The door creaked open, revealing a cozy home with 7 tiny chairs, 7 tiny beds, and a table set with 7 tiny plates. Curious and desperate for rest, Snow White ate a small bite of bread from one of the plates and fell asleep on one of the beds. Hours later, she was awakened by the sound of voices. 7 dwarfs, each with a unique personality, stood staring at her in surprise. "Who are you and why are you in our home?" asked Doc, the leader of the group. Snow White explained her plight, and the dwarfs, moved by her story, offered her shelter. "You can stay with us," said Grumpy, though he tried to hide his smile. "But you must help us keep the house tidy." And so, Snow White began a new life with the dwarfs. She cooked, cleaned, and sang as she worked, filling the cottage with joy. The dwarfs grew to love her as if she were their own sister, and for a time, Snow White felt safe and happy. But the queen soon discovered that Snow White still lived. Enraged, she devised a plan to rid herself of the princess once and for all. Disguising herself as an old peddler woman, the queen journeyed to the cottage with a poisoned apple. "One bite of this apple," she cackled, "and Snow White will sleep forever." When the dwarfs were away, the queen found Snow White in the garden. "Dear child," she said, her voice dripping with false kindness, "would you like a taste of this apple?" Snow White, unsuspecting, took a bite and immediately fell into a deep, enchanted sleep. The dwarfs returned to find Snow White lifeless. Heartbroken, they placed her in a glass coffin in the forest, where she lay as if in a peaceful slumber. Days turned into weeks, and the dwarfs kept watch, refusing to give up hope. One day, a prince from a neighboring kingdom rode through the forest. He had heard tales of a beautiful princess and was determined to find her. When he saw Snow White, he was struck by her beauty and grace. Leaning down, he gently kissed her forehead. At that moment, the spell was broken. Snow White's eyes fluttered open, and she smiled at the prince. The dwarfs cheered, and the forest seemed to come alive with celebration. The prince took Snow White to his kingdom, where they were married in a grand ceremony. As for the wicked queen, her jealousy and cruelty consumed her, and she vanished into the shadows, never to be seen again. Snow White and the prince ruled their kingdom with kindness and wisdom, and the 7 dwarfs visited often, bringing laughter and joy to the castle. And so Snow White's story became a legend, a tale of love, courage, and the triumph of good over evil. And they all lived happily ever after.